Welcome back, everybody, to Stop.Sit.Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen. We're here today with super exciting. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, so go ahead.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Joe Williams. I am an attorney in New York, and I am also one of the directors of New York Surrogacy Center, which is a New York-based surrogacy matching program.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh.
And you're the first licensed one in New York, right? That's
We
huge.
were. Yes, we were. It's very exciting. New York's laws finally are catching up with the rest of the country. And so, yeah, it's about time. But yes, we're very excited.
What year or when did you become licensed?
The law finally passed in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. Wow. And it went into effect in early 2021. And then it took a couple months for the licensing process. So it's been about May-ish of 2021.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. So 2 years.
2 years. It's 2 years. Yep. We just passed 2 years recently.
Great.
Wow. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. How has that experience been then because I mean, I'm going to be super upfront. I always thought New York and California, because we're from California, I always thought they were so similar in their beliefs and laws and all that kind of stuff. So I recently just found out that surrogacy is new for New York.
Yeah.
How is that going?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Like it's very, a lot of people are very surprised to hear, and people who don't, aren't like in this world wouldn't assume that New York is one of those states that had not great surrogacy laws for a long time. But we did. So before 2020, it was not legal in New York to compensate a surrogate. So, sometimes families had a sister or, a friend who was willing to do it uncompensated. The contracts still weren't enforceable, but it wasn't prohibited. But the compensation was. And so, agency matching and families who didn't happen to have a sister who was willing to do it for free had to go elsewhere. So, that was hard for New York families, and it sucked for women in New York who wanted to be surrogates because they couldn't be and then be compensated for it. Right. So the law changed in New York, and we now have, in my opinion, probably one of the best, most comprehensive surrogacy statutes in the country. It's super lengthy and dense, so it's no fun to read, but it is super protective of surrogates, intended parents. It makes the process really clear. It takes a lot of the best practices that we see in the industry and sort of make them part of the law. Wow. So it's been a pretty smooth rollout legally. The courts are responding really well to the petitions, and the process seems to be going really smoothly, knock on wood, so far. So it's been great.
Now, when you say petitions, Joe, are you talking about pre-birth judgments? Or are you talking about something else? Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. My dog is responding to the lightning outside. And so
let him hurt in. We don't, honestly, it doesn't matter. We're totally.
Right. He'll come in here in a minute, any minute, and I'll put him on. But yes, with respect to we have luckily a pre-birth order process in New York. And so we were able to pretty easily petition for pre-birth orders and make that happen.
Yep.
Sure. Oh.
No,
this is yeah. Little fatty.
This huge dog, just
super scared. No, just this little guy.
Oh, poor little thing.
It's okay. He just needs dad. It's all good.
Very nervous. Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
So 20 years ago when I did surrogacy, because I'm old, we had surrogates from New York, but they had to fly to California and set up residency for 30 days, have the baby. I had a friend who did. Yeah, I had a friend who did it. And the amount of money that cost the intended parents was absurd because she brought her whole family. She had 5 kids. They stayed in a 2-bedroom little condo, and the kids were bored out of their minds. So they let them go to parks and did that. Yeah, it was a lot of extra money on those intended parents, but that's how they did it.
And all the inconvenience for someone. I mean, it's hard to find somebody who's willing to do that because that's a huge,
Yep, for a whole 30 days and then some because you have to stay after the birth. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. But I'm so glad New York is up and rolling. That's lovely.
We're there. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Now you said you're a director of this agency. Who founded it?
So my partner Casey and I founded the agency. So we're both surrogacy attorneys. That's our background. And so, we were practicing in this area before the law changed and, working on independent matches and uncompensated matches and out-of-state matches. Oh, wow. And, it's just, this is the area that we love so much. And so when we were involved in working on the legislation in New York to finally get the law passed for many, many years, and it was disappointing for many, many years until it finally did pass.
Yeah.
But then we started the agency together in 2020 when the law did change. And so Casey, her role is that she works primarily with our intended parents. And I work primarily with all of our surrogates. And so we've sort of divided up responsibilities that way, but it's the two of us who run the agency.
Wow.
So how did you get involved with surrogacy then?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started out my career in family law, just sort of general family law. And I sort of quickly realized that doing like divorces and child custody and that sort of stuff is not
Taxing.
probably the way that I want to spend my all of my days. And so I started getting involved in adoption and other sorts of family formation law, assisted reproduction, sperm donation, that type of stuff, which sort of segued into surrogacy. And so, Casey and I both sort of found each other, and we both had an interest in that area of the law. And so we began sort of developing our practice in assisted reproduction and surrogacy, which sort of then developed into the agency.
So you had a practice first together, and then you went and did the agency.
We did. We've been together for a while. Yep. And then after practicing together in our law firm, we opened the agency. Yeah.
Now, can I ask a personal question? You don't have to answer it. Do you have any children through surrogacy?
I don't have children through surrogacy. Nope. I just, at this point, it's me and my 5 dogs, believe it or not.
And this is the only one who's freaking out?
He's the worst behaved one of them all. Yeah.
Oh.
The other ones are all chill. But yeah, as of now, it's just me and the dogs.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh.
And they're like our children as well, because we
100%.
both have dogs that are our children.
Absolutely. So then, since you guys are based in New York and you guys are going off of New York laws, can a surrogate that's not in New York apply with your agency?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Awesome.
We work with surrogates and intended parents all over the country. At this point, we don't really do any international surrogacy. We primarily are doing domestic cases, but yes, we work with surrogates all over the country. There are a few states who don't have friendly surrogacy laws still, where surrogacy is still prohibited or, unenforceable. And so, a lot of times we sort of try to stay away from some of those states, but there's only a handful, luckily.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yes, we work with surrogates and intended parents, anywhere in the country.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Or your surrogate applies to your agency. They do it online, I would assume.
Yep.
Right, with a little questionnaire, and then a reach out is made to kind of have the standard stuff. And it's pretty much the standard protocols, like the age limit. What is it in New York? What do you guys do?
So the eligibility criteria isn't really set by law in New York. Okay. So we have our surrogacy statute, and then the Department of Health regulates surrogacy. So New York is currently the only state that regulates the surrogacy industry or regulates surrogacy agencies. So we're the only state where agencies have to be licensed. So there are some regulations that the Department of Health puts out about, screening criteria and eligibility criteria for surrogates and intended parents, but generally it's ASRM criteria for the most part. Okay. So sort of all the standard things that you would imagine, 21 to 45 is the typical age range, that type of stuff.
45, I like that.
Now, that's not every clinic's criteria, but certainly,
Right, every clinic is different. Okay, so I kind of have an uneducated myself question. So when you say that you guys are licensed, licensed in what, like, per se? Like,
that's a good question. So, and it's interesting because no other states do licensing of surrogacy agencies. So the way that it works in New York is that in order to practice as a matching program, you have to get licensed by the state. So you have to be approved by the state in order to act as a surrogacy agency. And if you're not licensed, you're not allowed to operate in New York. No. So in order to get licensed, we go through an application process with the Department of Health. They do background checks on all of the owners and the managers of your company. They look into your policies and procedures to make sure that you're following all of the requirements of New York state law and industry best practices and ASRM and those sorts of things. So it takes a while to
Yeah.
get through the licensing process, but you know, I think it's a good thing. I think that it's something that will probably start showing up more and more places.
Yeah.
Because it, you know, holds agencies accountable to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. It gives people who have problems with their agencies somewhere to go to, you know, file a complaint if they need to. And it makes sure that agencies are, you know, doing what they're supposed to do, you know, as far as, you know, what their service agreements provide with their intended parents and things like that. So, you know, that's, and there's probably about 30 or so agencies currently. I haven't looked super recently, but, you know, the Department of Health, you know, has a list of all the agencies that are licensed in the state, and there's about 30 or so now.
So in 2 years, 30 have popped up. Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of them are agencies, like big agencies that are, you know, coming into practice in New York, not like New York specific agencies, you know, like bigger agencies that you know, ones that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah,
that, you know, have come into New York.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
That is seems like a very long process, but it seems like it definitely is safer and like just for everybody involved. Like it just, there's like a safety net for everybody who's involved with it.
No, I think it's a good thing for sure. It holds everybody, you know, makes sure things are being done the way they're supposed to be done. Which is, you know, of course, important and for everybody.
Very. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So so are you guys don't do international, but you guys are domestic. Are you guys LGBTQ friendly?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm gay. So that's very, you know, yes, absolutely. We, you know, we have all sorts of different types of intended parents and single parents.
Amazing.
Sex, obviously. Yeah, for sure. All across the board.
Good. We like to hear that.
Yes, absolutely. Of course.
Do you guys offer like support meetings and stuff like that for your surrogates? Like some agencies it's common, other agencies they're just like you're kind of like on your own.
Yeah, no, I think that's a hugely important part of the process.
Okay.
You know, we have like informally, we have like online like communities. We have like a Facebook group specific for our surrogates. We do a monthly support group. And it's run by a licensed mental health professional who, you know, works in the surrogacy world. And it's just for the surrogates. Intended parents are not welcome. So it's just for GCs, and she does them once a month virtually. You know, it's optional. We send out an invitation to anyone and everyone in our program, current, former, you know, just getting started, finished journeys, to, you know, attend. And she doesn't really have so much of an outline, so much as an opportunity just to chat and, you know, talk about what's going on in their journeys, talk about any concerns they may have, issues they might be having with intended parents, with clinics, with whatever it might be. So we offer those once a month. And then of course we always have, you know, mental health professionals available if a surrogate individually with her partner, with her spouse, with her intended parents ever wants to talk, if something's going on or, you know, something comes up in the journey where they feel like they could use a little something extra.
That's nice.
You know, yeah, that stuff is always available. I think it's super important to make sure that we're addressing those kind of things as, you know, early on before anything becomes more of an issue than it has to.
Right.
Absolutely. Oh my
Do
gosh.
you does each surrogate have a coordinator? Do you have like coordinators within the agency and so they're kind of assigned?
Yeah. So the way we structure things is I work primarily with all of our surrogates, and we're a small agency. You know, we are so I work primarily with all of our surrogates. Casey works with all of our IPs directly. And then once there's a match, each match is assigned a case manager.
Okay.
And so they have a designated person who is, you know, helping with all the logistical stuff, scheduling monitoring appointments and, you know, handling reimbursement requests and all the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, we still Casey and I both stay very hands-on throughout the whole process.
Right.
You know, I think that that's just an important part of our model. We're a small agency and we plan to stay that way.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. I like to hear that. I had on the tip of my tongue and now I forgot it. Go ahead if you have one.
Well, I have a question.
Go for it.
How do you guys do matching?
Yeah.
Different agencies do different things.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, we create profiles for all of our surrogates and all of our intended parents, you know, with some, you know, preliminary just sort of background stuff, a little personal statement about, you know, what brought you to the process, that type of thing. You know, because I think one of the main benefits of having or being a small agency is that we know everybody. So we know all of our surrogates really well. And I spend a lot of time getting to know them throughout the screening process. Same thing, you know, Casey gets to know all of our intended parents pretty well too. You know, I meet with their spouse, and if their kids are old enough, I meet with their kids, and we sort of just talk about what's important to them in a match. And, you know, are they somebody who is really hoping to become good friends with their intended parents? And do they want them to be there for milestone appointments or not? And I always tell everyone, like, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions. It's just a matter of, you know, what do you feel like you're most comfortable with? What do you, when you visualize what you hope for your surrogacy journey to look like, what do you see? To make sure that, you know, we're aligning them with a set of parents who feels the same way. So, you know, we talk to them in a lot of detail while we're going through the pre-screening process. You know, we start, you know, from the very first intake phone call I have with a surrogate, we start talking about, like, you know, hey, here's some things to think about when you think about a potential match. And it's basic stuff like, you know, geographically, where are you comfortable traveling? You know, do you have preferences about the demographic type of family that you work with? And then as we go through the process, you know, more, you know, things about, like, okay, well, have you thought about, like, are you comfortable with them being in the hospital room? And are you comfortable with, you know, this, that, and the other? Obviously, it's hard to predict when you haven't met a family yet, or you've met them for, you know, one match meeting, whether you're going to want them in the hospital room, but just sort of getting a sense of, you know, how comfortable they are with involvement in those types of things. And so then we meet as a team once a week and go over, you know, who's ready for the matching process, what this surrogate is looking for, what these intended parents are looking for, and then do our best to, you know, figure out who might be a good fit for each other based on all of the various criteria. And knock on wood, we've been pretty successful with, we have a pretty good track record of matches that have worked out pretty well. So that's kind of how we do it. No particular algorithm or anything like that, just sort of trying to get to know all of our clients as well as we can to figure out what makes the most sense.
If the surrogate has a match meeting and meets the individuals or individual, and it just isn't clicking how they thought it was going to click. Do you guys suggest another match meeting, or do you immediately move them to someone else, or maybe just kind of explore their fears on why they're a little hesitant?
I think it would depend on the situation. If it was, you know, I'm just feeling a little apprehensive, you know, we can talk about, you know, what is it that's making you worried? Is it something specific to this particular family, or is it that you're just nervous about this process because it's becoming more real now that you're about to be matched? Or did they, like, say something or have, like, an opinion or a position that you really just don't agree with? And if it's that, we would never want to have anyone feel like we're trying to convince them into a match that they're not excited about. So if it's something like that, we move on. If it's just, you know, how does this work? What's going to happen with the next steps or whatever, you know, certainly we'll talk it through and try to answer any questions to make them feel comfortable, but not in a, it's never a good idea, I think, for anybody to try and force a match that's not a good match. It's just going to make the whole process, you know.
Yes.
So
speaking
much
from experience, yes, I 100% agree with you. Yes. Okay. Right. That's good.
Out of curiosity, do you have the number of how many successful journeys have happened with you guys within 2 years?
I can tell you that we're right around 100 matches.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
And we have, let me look at my list right now. I'll tell you, I think we're at around 9 or 10 births so far.
Because they take 9 months, so you got to figure that, you know, that's a really high number.
2 years ago. Yeah, that's a great number.
We've had 11 births so
that's
far.
Awesome.
So, yeah, no, it's been really, really great. Really great.
Great. And are any of those 11 birth surrogates that have gone through the journey, have they come back to repeat yet, or is it too soon?
Yes, we have.
Look at that.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we do.
Great.
Which is great. And that's really, I love to hear that. That's an endorsement that they had a good experience, and that, you know, that's so, yes. And hopefully, you know, we've got several that are going through the process right now, and a handful of surrogates have already talked about, like, you know, what does it look like to do a second journey? Like, how long do we have to wait to do a second, which I love. So
how long do you have them wait, or is it clinic specific?
It's up to the clinics. Usually we see 6 to 12 months for a vaginal delivery. A lot, I think we are seeing more closer to the 9 to 12 month range. But
Yeah.
we would leave that up to the clinic, and also just,
Yeah.
what everyone's comfort level is, there's
Yeah,
no,
pretty
Yeah.
normal.
whatever timeline they happen to be on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to kind of transfer it over to the legalities of
Okay.
New York. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So the legalities of New York. Like I said, I just found out that you guys weren't even legal for forever. So what are some of the things that have been decided that like needs to be
In a contract.
in a contract? Yeah.
Okay. So one of the big thing about New York is we have what's called the Surrogate's Bill of Rights. And it is something that's in our statute, in the law, and it's a list of things that surrogates are entitled to, that they're not waivable. They have to be included in your agreement. It's that surrogates have a right to have their health insurance premiums covered by the intended parents. They have a right to have life insurance coverage paid for by the intended parents. They have the right to make all health and medical decisions regarding themselves and the pregnancy, regardless of what their contract says. They have the right to have independent legal counsel paid for by the intended parents. So there's this laundry list of things. These all have to be included in the contract. They're not waivable. If you try to waive them, your contract's not enforceable. The waiver is not enforceable.
Yeah.
So it's designed to be very protective of
Right.
surrogates. And it's sort of designed also to make sure that all of the, important things that a lot of times we would advocate for on behalf of surrogates anyway are not optional.
Okay.
So, the intended parents have an obligation to, pay her insurance premiums, even if she has a surrogacy friendly insurance policy, through work or whatever, the intended parents are obligated to cover those premiums.
Yeah, I want to jump on the where the surrogate has the right to make the medical decisions irregardless of the contract. Let's just take a for instance case.
Yeah.
Twins happen. We have a twin to twin transfer issue going on, something where one of them is in jeopardy, one of them is doing well, one of them's not growing, or even Down syndrome. The parents want to reduce. It's in the contract that the parents can reduce. Surrogate has the end all be all if it's not jeopardizing her life, or if it is jeopardizing her life, or nothing, just she gets to decide.
All of the above.
Wow.
Now, so backing up, that's not, so a lot of people, intended parents in particular, are freaked out about that idea.
Right.
But it's really not any different than logistically what would probably happen anyway. Everyone has a constitutional right to make medical, I shouldn't say nowadays, but theoretically people have a constitutional right to make decisions regarding their selves and their bodies and their medical care. It is a surrogate's pregnancy, and so no one could force a surrogate to get an abortion if she didn't want to anyway. Like, no doctor's going to perform an abortion on someone who is saying, absolutely not, I'm not going to do it. Right. And then the same thing vice versa. No one can prevent a surrogate from having an abortion if she wants to, even if her contract says she's not supposed to. Wow. So the New York provision just sort of makes it clear that, even if you have a provision that she is or she isn't going to do something, whether it's a double embryo transfer instead of a single embryo transfer, or invasive genetic testing, or whatever it might be, that she can't be compelled to do any sort of medical procedures or anything like that. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be financial consequences to the surrogate if she breaches a provision of the contract that requires her to do or not to do something. But, it just makes it clear that she has a constitutional right to, make all of her own medical decisions.
All right, then I'm going to throw an easier example out. In the contract, amniocentesis has been placed in there. If Dr. OBGYN says, yes, we need to just check and blah. And if surrogate is like, hell no, I'm not, no way in heck, I've seen those needles, I'm not doing it. Would that constitute getting a financial hit, or?
It depends on, I think, how the contract is drafted and what the remedy and breach section of the contract looks like.
Okay.
And it also depends on, whether it's worthwhile to the intended parents to try to take that to court to file for a breach against her based on something like that. Okay. Logistically, they wouldn't be able to go to court to force her to have it done. Like, that would not ever happen. Okay. But could they say, our contract says this, she breached the provision, I want financial damages? Perhaps.
Okay. That's fair, because
That's
honestly,
fair.
when you look at a contract, you're talking about all these things usually up front. And
Absolutely.
and you're agreeing to these things, not knowing if you'll ever be in that situation.
Yep.
I'm just speaking from experience. I agreed to have a reduction. I got pregnant with triplets.
Ah,
I said, no way, no how.
mm,
We're giving life here, I'm not taking it away. And we went toe to toe. And luckily, something happened medically that they said, oh no, let's carry all three. But we were like a
wow.
day away.
That's
And
hard.
I really didn't have a right. And so that's where
Wow.
I was trying to get to. How far could they take it? And they could take it to court, right?
They could.
Okay.
They could. You know,
Okay.
the question then becomes like, how do you quantify those damages, right? For something like an amnio, for example, like maybe, you know, nothing would have come, you know, it's hard to put a dollar amount on that.
Mhm.
You know, but at the same time, you don't want to say to surrogates, like, you know, do whatever you want, because it's not going to be, you know, they're not going to be able to enforce it. Like, we do want
Right.
people going into these contracts with the understanding that they are in fact going to be bound by what they're saying they're going to do, even though we all know that there are some provisions in a surrogacy agreement that aren't really enforceable, like lunch meat. How are you going to enforce necessarily that that's going to
Right.
happen? That we all see crazy contract provisions sometimes, and we just are hoping that everyone's going into the agreement, you know, in good faith with the intent to actually do what they say they will.
Right.
Right.
I have a question. So because one of the things that was not allowed in New York, you said, was compensation. Surrogates weren't allowed to be compensated. So now, is there like a limit? Like, is there like constrictions on compensation?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, not really.
Okay.
The statute just says that the compensation has to be negotiated in good faith.
Okay.
So there's not like a dollar amount set. So, you know, our agency, for example, our like starting base compensation is 45,000 for first time surrogates and
Very
50,000
generous.
for experienced surrogates.
Very generous.
So, and
Yeah.
that's changed over time. You know, we just sort of are keeping tabs on where things sort of are falling across the country with other agencies and what other agencies are doing to make sure that, you know, we're staying in line with, you know, what surrogates could expect elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, but no, it's
Okay.
not something that's set in stone. You know, and courts, at least in my experience, are not really like combing through surrogacy agreements to see like if they think the compensation is fair or appropriate. Like they're not looking at the contracts that closely. So no, there's no cap, there's no maximum, there's no minimum. It is still, you know, some surrogates are still willing to act altruistically, uncompensated. Again, you know, so it's not required that compensation be part of the process, of course. But no, it's generally something that's in an independent journey, for example, left to the parties to decide, or up to the agencies to sort of set what sort of standard compensation schedule they'd like.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So with you guys being lawyers as backgrounds, do you guys don't represent as well? Yeah, because that would be conflict of interest, right?
Definitely conflict, yeah. And even if we wanted to, we wouldn't, it's not allowed under our statute, but we wouldn't anyway.
Okay.
That's one of everyone has to have independent legal counsel, separate and apart. So no, everyone, if it's a New York, we generally follow the law of the state where the child will be born, where the surrogate lives. So if it's a New York match, everyone would have New York attorneys. If it's, you know, if the surrogate's in Florida, they would likely have Florida attorneys.
Okay.
Ooh, okay, wait. Okay, okay, so if a surrogate comes to you, they live somewhere other than New York.
Yep.
You guys are going based off of her state and not New York's.
Most of the time.
Okay.
The reason for that is theoretically the baby will be born wherever she lives. And so that, you know, so if a baby's going to be born in Florida, a baby's going to have a Florida birth certificate. And so we would want to make sure that parentage for the intended parents and the surrogate are being established under the law where the baby's going to be born, because we don't want surrogate listed on the Florida birth certificate because we don't have a order that complies with whatever Florida's requirements are. And I'm just using Florida as an example. It would be the same way in any state. So generally that's what we do. Now, if we have a surrogate in a state that doesn't have surrogacy friendly laws or surrogacy laws at all, like Arizona, Indiana, those types of states, we would generally follow New York law, because we can, based on if the intended parents live there, because, you know, we can select the law based on where somebody lives.
Okay.
So, you know, if we had a New York intended parent and an Arizona surrogate, for example, we would be able to follow New York law and get a New York order. You know, and one of the things we always just do very early in the process when we have surrogates or intended parents out of state is bring in a surrogacy attorney from whatever state they're in to make sure like we understand like the lay of the land in that state. Like, how does your birth certificate process work? Can we get pre-birth orders? You know, can you get a pre-birth order for a non-biologically related embryo? Can we get a pre-birth order for a gay couple? All the, you know, because that's really varies a lot state to state. And so, you know, before we set up a match, you know, we want to make sure that we have an understanding of like, you know, and luckily, you know, we are attorneys, so we have a lot of attorneys in our network who do this type of law all over the country. You know, Joanna being one of them. And so anytime we have like, hey, what's going on in Missouri? How do we do this? Like, we can always reach out to make sure that, but generally the rule is that we would, you know, use the law of the state where the baby's going to be born, which is typically where the GC is.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Good to
And
know.
then money, all the money's held in a trust. That's just probably a yes or no. Right?
Yeah, we use Seed Trust.
Oh yeah,
you guys are familiar with.
Yeah, we interviewed them. They were great. Yeah.
So yeah, they've been, you know, when we first opened the agency, we did escrow in-house because we thought like, oh, no problem, we do escrow. We're a law firm, we've done escrow accounts for our clients before. Nope, it's a full-time job. So we don't do escrow anymore. We use Seed Trust, and so we can focus on all the other aspects of the journey. And Seed Trust does a great job.
Yeah, they do, and they're really reasonably priced.
Nice. Yeah, they are.
And they're just so nice, and big fan.
So we definitely, and it's required. I mean, again, it's required in New York law anyway. I mean, we would do this as agency policy, but you have to use an independent licensed escrow company to hold the funds.
That makes sense. That does make sense.
That's good. I'm really wanting your laws to come over to California now. Like
there's other states that need it worse than California.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, I know you can't speak on it like 100%, but do you see it possibly being able to be laid out throughout the country eventually over time?
I'm
hopeful.
I think that, you know, there's two things, you know, having surrogacy law, period, just like legalizing and creating a mechanism to establish parentage is one thing. Having a set of laws that actually like regulates surrogacy agencies and takes the extra step of like, you know, going as far as New York does. I think that we're more likely to see things like that popping up in states that are already surrogacy friendly. Like I could see California adopting like a regime of licensing agencies as like a best practice thing because you already have like a robust surrogacy like framework. Whereas, you know, states like, you know, Michigan, for example, who have awful surrogacy laws, like I think we'll start with the basics first before but you know, I think that it's certainly some of the, and I don't know what like the legislatures in these states are saying about surrogacy, but like, you know, to the extent that there are concerns that, you know, surrogacy is, you know, something that people could be taken advantage of, or, you know, whatever, you know, some of those potentially legitimate concerns can be addressed in a lot of ways by some of the things that New York does, because, you know, there are these safety nets to protect surrogates from, you know, not having all of the rights and things that they're entitled to, and making sure that the intended parent can have those protections. So maybe. When you said that there's a surrogate bill of rights, I now have to go look. I want to go look that up and like read everything. And I'm so envious because I would love to know what are my rights. Like I think that's a big question for a lot of surrogates too. Like, what are your rights being a surrogate? Right.
Because it's not talked about.
And it's not like there's no list anywhere else, right? I mean, so you know, other than what your contract says, if you're at the point where you have a contract, you know, there's no so it's Article 5C of the Family Court Act if you're interested in
that's one of the reasons, Joe, we actually are doing this podcast, is just to try and get information out there to surrogates who are thinking about it and just go, oh, I don't know anything about it, so I can't even do this. It's just a conversation. That's all we're trying to have. And through that conversation, more and more things keep coming up. And we're like, oh, New York has a Bill of Rights for surrogates. How come California can't have that? Like, let's get on the bandwagon, because we are extremely surrogate friendly out here. Like, we were one of the first way back when, like
Yep.
that were really friendly. So you would think we'd get one. So I think we might get on that bandwagon.
There you go. Push for it. Now you've got a blueprint, you've got a template.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you-
Yeah. Now we just
Pioneers,
gotta
man.
That's
Woohoo.
right.
get it
That's
in.
right.
Okay, so so in this Bill of Rights, or well, it's not going to be in the Bill of Rights. I take that back. But in this statute, right? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, what if the surrogate wants to keep the baby? Is there now protection that New York has like instated in some document saying like that's not going to happen?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I get that question from surrogates too. You know, what if the intended parents change their mind and say they don't want the baby? And it's like, well, and so everybody's worried about that, right? So across the board. And you know, it's very clear in the statute that, you know, one of the things that your surrogacy agreement has to include is, you know, this agreement that from the moment of transfer, the moment of conception, that, you know, the child is legally the child of the intended parents,
Okay.
not the surrogate, not the surrogate spouse if she has one. And so one of the things that is, you know, and this is the case for parentage proceedings, you know, not only in New York, but other places, is it's not conferring parental rights on the parents. It's not saying you are now parents because you have a pre-birth order. It's confirming that this is your child, so that you have a piece of paper which says what already exists, that this is your child. And it just is sort of trying to make it clear in writing for the hospital and for the registrar and for all the other administrative people.
Right.
So the agreement, which will obviously be signed prior to transfer, is very clear that from the moment of birth, this is the child of the intended parents. And then the parentage proceeding, because it's a pre-birth parentage proceeding, it happens during pregnancy, so before the baby gets here. Typically, it's brought by the intended parents. But it could be brought by the surrogate, you know, filing a petition. So, you know, from the intended parents' perspective, if they're concerned that they want to make sure that they're legally protected, you know, is they can file it, you know, as soon as there's a pregnancy, right? You know, they can technically file it before there's a pregnancy once the contract is signed, but normally people wait till like the second trimester usually. But they file this parentage petition and they get it, or this parentage petition, they get an order that says that they're the parents. And so it's legally established before the baby gets here. If the surrogate was concerned, she could file the parentage petition and make sure that there was an order that says I'm not the legal parent, so that is in place before the baby gets here. So, you know, realistically, from a legal standpoint, no, there's no concern. There's no danger of that happening. Luckily, knock on wood, we've never, ever had a situation where that was ever a concern or a problem. But even if it ever did come up, legally, neither party would be able to have any success with that.
That is good. I think that's, I mean, clearly that's comforting for surrogates. That's crazy. I've never heard the fear of them not maybe wanting their baby, but that's a legitimate fear because something could go wrong or something.
Yeah, so we get the question of like, you know, what if they change their mind? What if they both die during the pregnancy? Like, am I going to be responsible for this child?
Right.
That's always, that's usually written on I don't know if it's in a contract, but maybe it's in the trust of the parents. It's somewhere that says who gets.
Yep. And that's actually in our statute too in New York now, that the intended parents are required to have wills in place, and their wills have to designate a guardian, and the contract has to specify that their guardian not only takes responsibility for the child, but they also have to finish out all of the IP's obligations under the contract.
Wow.
And that's required to be in place before legal clearance goes out. So, that's built into, so that's required in New York. We as an agency require that in every state case, regardless of what state you're in, just because we think it should be the practice. And we require that surrogates have living wills and healthcare proxies in place too, just to make sure that, you know, all of those, you know, while they're meeting with their lawyer and having the conversation about their surrogacy agreement, we also have them talk to their attorney about those documents as well. Because a lot of times that kind of stuff gets addressed in a surrogacy contract. But you know, if something, God forbid, were to come up during pregnancy, like the hospital's not like combing through a 60-page surrogacy agreement to figure out like what her wishes are. So, you know, we have those documents put in place, you know, all before legal clearance goes out, so that
that's perfect.
You know, everything's done. Everyone's concerns can hopefully be as assuaged as possible, but
what is there any, okay, so after delivery, I mean, because I know like contracts can like still be in place for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks after. Is there anything that's different that like is like in your statute about post baby?
Yes.
Okay.
The big difference is, and this freaks out a lot of intended parents, is
Oh.
that intended parents are responsible for covering the surrogate's health insurance and life insurance for 12 months after the baby's born,
12?
which is crazy. But
Crazy.
yeah, but that's what the statute provides currently. That you know, I think that may change at some point. You know, there is some, you know, lobbying going on to shorten that time period, but at this point in time, it's 12 months. The theory behind it was, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, there's insurance in place, there's escrow funds in place if any sort of post-delivery complications come up, or, you know, their medical bills come in the mail way after she goes home. But like 12 months is excessive. But you know, and it's an expense for intended parents for sure to maintain health insurance premiums for an extra year. So that's the big difference in New York.
Can the surrogate opt out of that or no? Okay, no.
Wow, she can't.
That's one of the things in the Surrogate's Bill of Rights.
Okay. I mean, it protects her,
Now,
yes, but
if
I
it's
feel
an
bad for the parents. Yeah.
if it's an uncompensated journey, that's not required, but in a journey that is compensated, that's built in. Now, one of the things that is kind of nice, and so yeah, on the one hand, like IPs are like, what? I don't want to match with a New York surrogate. I'm going to have to pay 2 years of health insurance.
Yeah.
You know, but on the flip side is almost all, and I can't say all, but the vast majority of insurance policies in New York, we have found are surrogacy friendly. And there was a mandate from the governor's office around the time that this law went into, it's called the Child Parent Security Act is the name of the law. When it went into effect, it basically said that, you know, insurance carriers have to cover surrogacy pregnancies the same way they would cover regular pregnancies. So it doesn't cover IVF, it doesn't cover fertility meds and embryo transfer, but it covers maternity care, it covers labor and delivery, it covers postpartum, that type of stuff.
Wow.
And so it usually, you know, it's certainly cheaper than like a Lloyd's of London plan, and it's often cheaper than an ACA plan. So even though they're paying for longer in New York in a lot of cases, it's often cheaper than it would otherwise be anyway, because they're only having to pay, like, for example, if the surrogate has insurance through her job, you know, and she has to pay, you know, $100 biweekly out of her paycheck, that's a reasonable health insurance premium for the intended parents to cover.
Right.
Rather than an ACA plan, which could be, you know, $700 a month.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really nice. There are not a lot of health insurances in California.
Right. I mean, it's really hit or miss everywhere else. But yeah, I would say I've come across, I think, one New York-based health insurance policy that has not been surrogacy friendly in the last 2 years. And most of our surrogates are in New York. So
that's phenomenal for everybody involved.
Right.
Yeah, it really is.
Because that's usually, besides IVF, that's usually one of the biggest parts of it.
One of the biggest expenses for sure.
And trying to get them covered under another plan. Like you have your own and then you've got to go out and get covered under this other plan.
Right. And then you got to drop this one, which one is secondary, which one is. And even, you know, and in New York, we have every state has different rules about like open enrollment periods and when you can get on an ACA plan. And New York is one of there's a handful, probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 or so, where you can get on an ACA plan when you have confirmation of pregnancy, even if it's outside of the open enrollment window. So there are some additional insurance options in New York, even if she doesn't have surrogacy friendly insurance. You know, there's more options to get on an ACA plan at other times of the year.
And ACA, I'm being naive. What does ACA stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Affordable Care Act, like a marketplace Obamacare plan.
Yep, Obamacare. Okay, got you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'll have to look at that one for us. I don't think that happens.
No, not us. We're not that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know the list off the top of my head, but I know there's a few.
No, but that's very nice of New York. I'm really, really, really into all your guys's everything that's on that statue. I mean, because nothing sounds absurd except for the 12-month thing. Like that's
I hear you.
It's the only thing that I'm like, I've never heard that. Everything else I've heard in passing or I have experienced myself. So like it's all kind of normal, but that one's just like a lot.
That one's a lot.
Yeah.
What if she gets pregnant on her own, like for her own family within that 12-month period? Like you're like,
Don't throw
what?
out these hypotheticals.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah. And it's true. Like for example, just this week, we have a surrogate who finished a journey recently, and her intended parents are currently paying for a year's worth of premiums post-birth. And she's interested in doing a second surrogacy journey. And this clinic will allow her to rematch after 6 months. And so there's a possibility that we may be in a period of time where she's been rematched with new intended parents who are going to be responsible for her insurance premiums, but her old IPs are still paying. So I don't know how we're going to navigate that yet, but it does create some, and it's a new law. And so it hasn't been in place for a long time. And so it's been 2 years, but like it takes a year to go through a surrogacy journey realistically. And so a lot of this stuff is still being navigated through a little bit.
Yeah.
But
very interesting. That's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see them reducing it down to 6 months and like that making sense, because you can potentially start another journey. The surrogate could potentially start another journey at that 6 months. So it would make sense. Just 12 months is a lot. Oh my gosh.
And I get the theory that like, sometimes medical bills come late, and, that is certainly makes sense, keeping escrow open for a little while. And I do understand, but
the whole year.
12 months is a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So, okay. So because the IPs are still paying for insurance for a year, when is that contract considered like terminated, like done at the end of them paying?
Yeah, I mean, in those cases, escrow stays open for, at least a year post-birth, because it has to cover those premiums. So yeah, I mean, technically it would be a year after.
Okay. But a surrogate could technically still get into another contract with a different IP.
Maybe that's what they said is coming up. Yeah. Maybe have to deal with that.
Right. And I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that.
Right.
But,
lots of
but yeah.
What do you guys do post-birth? Baby's born, it was a beautiful outcome, everything went well. We advocate for the surrogate to have a little bit of time by herself, maybe an hour, to say goodbye, or so that the family can kind of get closure with the baby. How do you guys feel about that? And do your lawyers or your surrogates have any opinions on that?
So we don't really typically talk with the attorneys much about that topic, but what we typically do during the 3rd trimester is we call it hospital planning, or like birth planning, where we work with the intended parents and the surrogate. We send each set a questionnaire. So we say to the intended parents, here's all the, possibilities that might come up like during the birthing process. Like, who do you want to be in your perfect world? Who do you want to have in the room? If there's occupancy limitations and it can only be one person, who's it going to be? Or do you want to have your kids there? Do you want to have other family members there? Do you want to take pictures with your surrogate? Are you comfortable with her, bonding? Who's going to do skin to skin? Who wants to go? So just like this whole list of things to figure out what exactly the intended parents want. And then we send a very similar questionnaire to the surrogate so that she can fill out her preferences. And then we cross-check them and see, where are they maybe not on the same page. And then we work with them to sort of talk through those issues and say, here's what you were thinking. Here's what she was thinking. How can we sort of smooth that out? And normally they're very much on the same page by that time. And they've sort of talked about these things amongst themselves anyway. But we do that sort of hospital planning. And then we put together, what we call like a hospital plan, where we actually write out, here's what you guys mutually decided is going to be the birth plan. Her kids are going to be there. Her support person is going to be there. If they limit it to, if it's a C-section and they can only have one person in the OR, here's who it's going to be. We send it to the hospital so that the hospital has a heads up. Some hospitals are more familiar with surrogacy cases than others. New York, it's hit or miss because again, it's a newer thing here. And so we've definitely encountered some hospitals who are like treating surrogacy like an adoption because they don't know exactly, which is not great.
Not great.
Not great, not the same dynamic at all.
No.
So, educating the hospitals a little bit, arguing with the hospitals a little bit, and, trying to get exceptions and explaining to them why and they mostly are very flexible and have been lovely to work with. But But we have this document that surrogate, intended parents, hospital social worker, if they have a doula, her doula, they have it in hand, so they know what the plan's going to be.
Yeah.
So yeah,
none of that is put in the contract then. Really?
Well, I should preface, we don't write the contracts. We don't read the contracts even. I mean, we like review them to like if there's an issue or whatever, but we don't have like agency policy. You know, when we send like the match sheet for the lawyers to draft the contract, it doesn't include, you know, here's what the plan is for birth. Usually at that point, they don't know, you know, because they're just getting started on their journey together. So typically it's not something that would be in the contract, or not something that would be super clear in the contract. And so, you know, we like to sit with everybody as we're actually getting down to the final weeks and figure out, first of all, what's the hospital even going to allow? You know, if the hospital is going to have like a 2-person policy hard line, you know, let's not make a hospital plan that's not going to work.
So like, okay, you'll get time with the baby afterwards. And a lot of the times it'll say like, oh, with the IPs in there with you. And so I've always asked, no, I want an hour by myself, just because I can always change that in the end and be like, oh no, we had a great relationship. Like, let's all hang out. But I never just wanted them to like walk away and like me never say hi.
And look, I can totally imagine that there are scenarios where, you know, I'm sure that there are contracts where, you know, if the surrogate knows and thinks ahead of time, like this is something that I would like, I know that is really important to me. Especially if it's someone who's gone through a surrogacy journey before, they obviously are kind of going into the contract process with a little more like institutional knowledge about what to make sure is included in a contract.
Experience.
But, for sure.
But I like that you guys don't really have anything kind of like set in stone. It's like, well, we don't, it's a lot to ask IPs and gestational surrogates in the beginning, because you guys don't even know each other. So like, how can you expect to like put something in writing with something that's going to be so intimate and personal and it's a very public, private situation. So I like that you guys
contracts. It's held up contracts before from tons of people we've known. It's held them up. And so I love that you do the birth plan later and you kind of do a written thing and everybody agrees. That's the way it should be. Like,
And, you know, we, again, luckily, knock on wood, we haven't really come across a situation where there's been like a real significant dispute as to what the birth plan would be. But, you know, we would bring in a mental health professional in that scenario if we needed to, for everybody to like sit down and be like, okay, well, talk to each other. You know, why is it important to you that you be in the room, and why is it important to you that they not be? And, you know, hear each other, and maybe that will help. You know, obviously, if we need to bring attorneys into the process, we can. We never like to do that. If we don't need to. You know, we try to mediate internally as much as we can, but we also don't want to take on like an advocacy role for like either side necessarily.
Fine line.
But hopefully, knock on wood.
Did you guys come up with that on your own, or was that something that's in your statute that says there has to be a birth plan? Like it.
No, that's just sort of something that we, you know, we do that a lot. And like when we've been doing independent journeys, especially because, you know, in New York, it's like, can be a little bit of a shit show when you get to that, because like, how do you fill out the birth certificate? And like, what forms do we need to sign? And like, because I really, you know, we've had a lot of experiences where the hospitals are treating it like very similar to adoption. And in the way that it happens, you know, in the adoption world, it's just like everyone is very separate. Like you go to your room, you'll go to your room, and like there's not. So, which makes sense in a lot of cases in the adoption model, but so, you know, we have created this written plan of like, here's the difference, just so that we could, you know, in the hospital, a lot of times, if they have the guidance and if they have the information and they have the explanation and they've got something they can put in their file to say like, you know, they told us to do it this way, they'll do it. And it makes for a much more pleasant experience for everybody, obviously. And it also like a lot for first-time surrogates and first-time intended parents, which many times they are. It's a brand new experience. It can be uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do anything that the other person's not comfortable with. You know, they don't want to like invade her privacy. They don't, you know, she doesn't want to do any, you know, so it's good for everyone to be going into this new unknown potentially awkward experience,
Yeah.
sort of knowing here's what the plan is, so that, you know, it can just be sort of implemented. And obviously things happen and plans change and all that, but
Oh yeah.
you know, everyone, I think, you know, feels a little bit more comfortable knowing, you know, here's what to
Yeah.
expect, and, you know, where's the baby going to go, and I will be able to see the baby, and can my kids be here, and like, are we
Right.
okay taking pictures together, and those
Love
types
it.
of things.
Love it. Because those
No,
are
I
all the
do.
unknowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
And, you know, I feel, you know, I don't want surrogates to ever feel like they didn't ask for something, or they didn't like say something because they didn't want to speak up, because they didn't want it to be like, you know, not okay or not appropriate or whatever. So anyway.
Right on. You got
No,
it.
that's amazing that you guys do that.
I love it.
If a surrogate wants to come to your agency, what is its name? Where do they go?
Yes, so New York Surrogacy Center is the agency. And our website is www.nysurrogacycenter.com.
Okay.
Obviously we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias, New York Surrogacy Center. Yeah, so typically how the process would work, if anyone was interested, intended parents or surrogates, you know, just reach out either through our website, through email, however, you know, all of our contact information's online. You know, we'll set up an intake call where we'll spend about an hour going through information about our agency, information about the surrogacy process. I always like to just walk through, here's what a journey looks like. This is what the steps are. So, you know, everybody has kind of an understanding of what's involved in the process.
Yeah.
It can be super overwhelming at the first, you know, like, oh, I saw, you know, I follow somebody on TikTok who is a surrogate, and I think I would like to do it. Like, oh, you know, well, let's talk through what it's really like. And, you know, here's all that's involved, and you have to do injections and, you know, all of that stuff. So, you know, we'll spend a bunch of time just learning about the process and going over how it works and making sure that, you know, you're a good candidate, you understand the process, you want to do this, you are able right now in your life to take this on, you know, because it's important to also do it when it's the right time. So, but yes.
You said a good candidate, and this is something I meant to ask earlier. Is there any disqualifications that are like different because of New York's new rulings?
So that's a good question. The only things that are like actually in the Department of Health guidelines are the age requirements, 21 to 45.
Okay.
And that a surrogate has had, you know, at least one healthy, successful, relatively uncomplicated pregnancy in the past.
Right.
And then generally the guidelines basically say, you know, that she meets all other, you know, industry, blah, 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 which we sort of assume means, you know, ASRM type guidelines.
Yeah.
So that's really it as far as New York's requirements. You know, and we, as far as agency criteria that we screen for, we basically sort of adopt ASRM requirements as well.
Okay.
You know, we work with a lot of, you know, we work with pretty much all of the clinics in New York and a lot of the clinics in the surrounding states. And so we have a pretty good sense of what clinics look for what. Some clinics have, you know, much stricter criteria than others. So, you know, that's part of our matching process too, figuring out, you know, not only what family might be a good fit for you, but what clinic is going to be a good fit for you based on, you know, whatever her you know, information is, you know, age, BMI, pregnancy history, yada, yada, yada.
So just because intended parents are using a clinic, you might not necessarily send a surrogate to that clinic.
Right. So we wouldn't, if we, like, for example, if we are working with a fertility clinic, or you know, these parents are working with a fertility clinic and we know they have an age cutoff of 38. We're not going to introduce them to a 40-year-old surrogate because their clinic's going to say no, and we wasted everybody's time.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, you know, we have a pretty good sense, and we stay in regular contact with clinics because they update their criteria periodically, you know, things like vaccination status. That's been something that's changed over time, over the last 2 years. So, you know, we want to make sure that we know what their BMI requirements are, you know, how many prior C-sections would you approve before approving a surrogate? And so, you know, as part of our matching process, you know, we figure out who do we think might be a good fit? Okay, what clinic are they working with? What's their criteria? And then we reach out to their clinic and say, hey, we have a potential match for this set of parents. Here's your stats. What do you think?
Oh, you do that ahead of time. Oh, that's nice.
Do it ahead of time because we don't want to introduce people and have everybody like fall in love in a match meeting and then find out from the clinic, oh no, I'm sorry, she has too many C-sections and so we won't work with her.
Right.
Because that's, devastating.
Of course.
To intended parents who have been waiting for, however long to find their match.
Nice.
So yeah, we generally like to do that ahead of time. It takes a little bit longer
Yeah.
to get to the match meeting, which everyone's really anxious to get to, but we do think it's an important process because we have had situations where clinics have said, no, we don't think she would be a good candidate. She doesn't meet our criteria.
Then that's a bummer.
We would have to
rematch, right?
Rematch.
Or,
So it's easier to rematch before they've met than after, obviously.
So one more question on the match. When you do have a good match, you all think it's a good match and you want to do your match meeting, is the agency involved in that meeting, or do you kind of introduce and let them go off on their own?
No. So the way we do it is after we've exchanged profiles, everybody says, yes, I'm interested. Yes, I'm interested. We reach out to the clinic. They give us the heads up. Then we schedule the match meeting. We do them all virtually. So they're through Zoom. So it's, I like host the match meeting. And so the surrogate, her, spouse, partner, whoever else she wants to have attend the meeting, the intended parents and me. And so it's sort of like it's like a guided conversation type of thing. I don't like to be too much of a moderator. I like to sort of be as involved or not involved as people are comfortable with, but generally, we do introductions and I have kind of an outline of topics and we spend about an hour or so just sort of going through, getting to know each other. But yes, it's sort of a guided conversation that we lead. So it's not, we're not just like forcing people into a blind date and having to flounder on their own. Yeah.
Right.
Once that match meeting happens and everybody says, yes, I want to work with the opposite, do you allow them to keep communicating or do you need to get through contracts first or no?
Oh, no.
You're good.
As soon as the match is official, we exchange phone numbers, email addresses, all of that stuff so they can start their relationship.
That's nice. We
connect them with the fertility clinic to start the medical screening process. We don't even start the contract phase until after medical and psych screenings are done.
Right? Okay.
And we want them to start to talk to each other before we get to the psych screening phase because part of and we do psych screening after match. I know some agencies do it before match, but we do it after because we have them do it together.
Okay.
That's becoming a thing now. Just want to throw that out there.
Is that what you just did?
I just did that for the first time, and that's a very new
thing. Okay.
Yeah. I've never
like a joint session.
Yeah, the clinic would not allow us to move forward until we had a one together. And our psych person, she was like, I've never done this either. And I'm like, well, it's all good.
Okay. Yeah. The way we do it is we have the surrogate does an individual session, the intended parents do an individual session, and then they have a joint session together.
What is your purpose for them to do it together?
Yeah.
To make sure that after they've had, and it usually takes a couple weeks from the time they've had a match meeting until the time they have their psych scheduled at least. And so we want them to have, started to talk, to start to, visualize what this journey might look like, to text a little bit, whatever it might be. Sometimes they meet in person, depending on how close they live together. So partially it's just to see like, how's everything going? Is the relationship working? Like, did it seem great because you were excited and you had a 1 hour Zoom call and everything was wonderful? And is it still going good? But part of the sort of preliminary purpose was, we want the surrogate to be able to like talk through all of these, the emotional side. I always like explain to people like there's a lot of medical stuff that goes into surrogacy and the clinic is going to be handling that. And the medical screening is to handle all that stuff, but there's like 50% of the process is emotional. And I want to make sure that you're like ready for that part too. So, especially first time surrogates, you need to like sit down, it's one thing to talk to me about this stuff. Like I want you to talk to a mental health professional to, have you talked to your kids about this process? How do you talk to your kids about this process? How do they feel? How does this impact your marriage? How does this impact your job? Are you ready? Do you have support? Do you understand that this isn't your child? And this is, there might not be the exact relationship after the birth that you envision. And are you okay with that? And all those types of things. So we have them do that. We have the intended parents, same types of conversations, make sure that you guys are understanding of the whole process and make sure that you understand that yes, she's your surrogate. Yes, you're paying her. Yes, she's carrying your embryo. Yes, this is your baby. She's got a job. She's got kids. You have to understand boundaries, like all of those types of things.
Yeah.
So, and then the joint session is really to make sure, in the social worker's like opinion, did they all express the same things to her?
Right.
Did the surrogate say that, when asked about what type of relationship and communication she wants to have, did she answer the same way that the intended parents answered? And if not, let's talk about that. And, just to get a sense of, are you guys getting along? Do you feel comfortable? So that's why we do it post-match, and we introduce everyone early on so that they can start to get to know each other, start to communicate with one another, so that by the time they get to the medical screening where they're meeting in person, in some cases, by the time they get to the psych screening where they're having a virtual joint session, it's not like they're strangers sort of like awkwardly meeting each other and having these sort of very heavy conversations for the first time.
Right. No, it's a good thing to do. I mean, it's just new to me, but it's a great thing. It's a great thing to have. I think that we benefited from it for sure. So
yeah,
I can only imagine.
I think
go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, I think that having more opportunities for intended parents and surrogates to like be put in a situation where they're communicating with each other, the better. Because some intended parents and surrogates, they get along great and they talk all the time, and some don't, and that's okay. Obviously everybody's relationship is different, but having the match meeting and then having the getting everybody together for like some clinics that have like the clinic days where they bring the surrogates and the intended parents in on the same day, or having this joint session that we require them to do. It's just more sort of, you have the same conversations over again, make sure you're sort of forcing people to really think about these issues and talk about these issues so that if something does ever come up, they're not thinking about it for the first time. Right.
Everybody's on the same page from and it kind of gets into their heads, both sides, we're in agreement.
Right. And getting familiar with each other and just, sort of, I think that the best journeys are the ones where they have those open lines of communication from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Communication is key. Absolutely.
I just want to say one big takeaway I'm getting from speaking with you is you have the interest at heart for the surrogates and for the IPs. It just seems equally balanced. And I don't want to say we haven't heard that a lot, but it genuinely just emits from you. It's like you're equally and I think that's lovely. I wish more agencies would do it. And I'm not dissing the other agencies. I'm just saying I can hear it when you're saying, oh no, we want, and the surrogate needs to talk about it. It's emotional. It says, it is. It is. And it's a lot of stuff that hasn't been talked about before. So it's so nice to hear that. So I applaud you guys. It's great.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, that's how it should be. It's
that's how it should be.
No one, and it doesn't make any sense to do it any other way. No one's doing any sort of service by not taking care of,
both sides.
Great. It is very much a collaborative process, and making sure that everyone is comfortable. And, again, I think that we have the luxury of being a small agency. So everyone has our cell phone numbers, and if things come up, we can always be reached. And so we kind of just know what's going on with everyone. And so we're able to be a lot more hands-on. And so that helps. And we have a relatively small team. And so it just sort of enables us to be able to do that. And so, it works for us. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Lovely.
Oh my, is there anything that we did not cover that we should have?
That you want to bring up?
I know. I'm like a New York virgin, clearly. I know. I don't know lots of things.
No, I think we covered a lot of the New York stuff. People are scared of New York because it's new, which I understand. But it's a new law, and judges are seeing these things for the first time, and all that. But people shouldn't be.
I feel more comforted getting all this information. Surrogate Bill of Rights, sign me up. All these things that are in place to protect everyone, sign me up. This all sounds, and I live in a very surrogacy friendly state, but I still love everything that New York has done to protect everyone involved. It's huge.
It's great. Yes. And I'm hoping the other states will look at New York. And yes, it's in its infantile stage right now, but they'll see how well it's working, and it'll come.
I think so. And it is, and we've, the fear that we hear from a lot of intended parents is, oh my God, this is going to be so much more expensive. And it's not.
Okay.
The fear is, it comes down to the insurance. It always sort of comes down to the insurance, but, and I get it. First blush, it's whoa, that's another year of health insurance premiums. That's another, however many $1,000. But, I would encourage intended parents not to sort of count out New York, because the law is very protective. It isn't, in my experience, more expensive at all. Given sort of some of the other things with the insurance. There's a ton of really great fertility clinics in New York. The court process is really, really easy with getting a pre-birth order. The kink that we're still working on in New York is the birth certificates are taking a really long time to be issued post-birth, which is
do you find that's because they're pre-birth judgments and they're just New York's like, I don't know how to deal with this, or
I think it's a brand new thing in the Department of Health. I've had calls with the Department of Health, and they're aware of the issues and they're working on it. They're very understaffed is what we hear. It didn't help that the new birth certificate regime went into effect at the exact same time that COVID was exploding. And so the Department of Health had lots going on. Because it was like April of 2020 that the law passed.
Oh, geez.
So, they were making these regulations and developing this birth certificate process at the same time as, we were in the height of COVID. And so I think that has something to do with it too. But, it's less scary, for international intended parents, that would be a real issue. But we don't do any, they can't go home. So, having to wait weeks or months for a birth certificate doesn't work. Whereas, again, we don't do international surrogacy. And the other thing in New York is that it's not really permitted. One of the statute provides that at least one of the IPs has to be a resident. Or a citizen or a lawful permanent resident in order to be eligible. So, and again, I just know from being involved in legislation, the concern was that New York would turn into like the international hub for surrogacy. And so they wanted to restrict that a bit, which is why they included this provision that, at least one of the IPs has to be a US citizen or lawful permanent resident in order to get a pre-birth order in New York.
That's fair. I could see New York being the place to go. So
yeah, I understand. I understand why why they did it.
And maybe it will change. Who knows?
Maybe it will change.
Maybe. They'll see how everything plays out with what they've said, and see that everybody's playing by the rules and everything's going good. So this is really exciting. Like I feel so stupid to not know that New York was not the same as California.
Oh my God, there's lots of states. They're all different. No,
I know. I just everything that because I've never been to New York. I just know that some of the culture of New York and
progressive,
it's
right? Totally.
And so I'm just like, okay.
You would think.
Yeah, but that's amazing.
Thanks for taking the time. We so appreciate it.
Yes,
we really do.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. This was fun.
This was super fun, and your dog is adorable.
What's your dog's name?
His name is Angel.
Angel?
Yeah.
Oh, because he's all white?
I don't know. He's a rescue, and he had that name when I got him, so I just kept it. But
how sweet.
But
thank you for rescuing. I love it.
I know. Did you rescue all 5?
Oh my gosh, you're a saint.
They're a handful. They're all disabled, and so they are.
They're
a lot of work. They're a lot of work, but
are they big, little?
No, they're all little. I have 2 Chihuahuas, a Pomeranian, a Yorkie, and Angel, who's like a little mix of stuff. I don't know what he is.
Oh my God!
Look at you! Just want to
help. You have your hands full with your business. You do. You just want to help. You have the heart to help.
Big old heart. Well, gosh, good luck to the agency. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We can't thank you enough. Really, seriously.
Yes, thank you. And I just noticed that on your sweatshirt, it has.
I got my brand. Yeah, right.
There you go.
I saw it. I was like,
small. I gotta fix that. Yeah, right.
You have merchandise.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's right.
So cute. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Loved it.
What a dream of a human.
Oh my gosh. So cool.
Like,
how cool. And then he
a
rescued
sweet,
5
sweet
dogs.
human.
I know this is about surrogacy,
He's got like
but
the
I'm like,
nicest heart.
so cute. Nice. Oh, it's telling me my
But like it
internet.
goes with it because like he has saved five little babies.
And he's
Yeah,
trying
but
to
like
create
he's just so
families.
sweet. Like he's rescues dogs, he helps surrogates and IPs.
Look, he's creating his own family with
It's fantastic.
his little rescues and creating families with people who need the help. Like, more power to him. So nice. Gosh, and so
I
a
know.
wealth of information. Like, he actually helped with the legislation on that law, which is amazing. Amazing. He helped with that, the writing of it, or the I'm gonna go look it up. I wrote it down.
I know, me too.
I'd love to read it. Yeah.
Article 5C of the Family Court Act.
And it's the Child Parent Security Act is I think the name of the part of the legislation. So yeah.
Thanks so much. I really feel so naive to not have ever known that New York was not surrogate friendly.
Well, I could have told you that.
I'm sure you could have, but why would we ever just talk about New York? I mean,
right.
New York and LA just to me are like one and the same.
They're usually the trendsetters, is usually how that goes, right?
They are. They're like they're always like the step ahead of everybody. And so like to hear that they were to hear that they were so far behind is a huge shock. But everything that they have in place sounds so fantastic. And like kudos to New York Surrogacy Center for being the first licensed agency.
Woohoo! That gets props.
That is huge. That is huge.
And then he said there's like 30 now, right?
30. Yeah. Well, just insane.
Great. Love it.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much, Joe. And he said where you guys can find him. And it's just phenomenal. So if you guys have any questions or would like to share your story with us, please feel free to reach out to me at Stop.Sit.Surrogate. And this has been another episode of Stop.Sit.Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen.
See you later. Bye, guys.
Bye.